Good evening, folks. This is Brian Brower.
If anyone else would like to be seen by the public tonight, you just have to turn your video on. So there's 3 of us right now, and the static city seal we can see. So I'm going to call the meeting to order tonight. It's a budget workshop, May 27th, 2020. And I'd like to ask Councilmember James, who looks like you're in the chambers tonight, if you lead the Pledge of Allegiance for us, please.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilmember James. We'll do a roll call tonight. So, Councilmember James?
Here.
Councilmember Ham?
Here.
Councilmember Ward?
Here.
And Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson is here. So we have a quorum. Everyone is here tonight.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
if I could be recognized, please.
Oh, please, Councilmember James.
I would like to make a motion before we get going to put on the agenda tonight the Sheriff Barnes letter, the fence issue, and parking, all as one agenda item to talk about this evening.
I'm happy to second your motion for that. I would like to make a comment, however, that I did bring this to the attention of the city manager and city clerk on Saturday to have this on the agenda, but I was denied under policy 1201-11. I think the city attorney said I couldn't add it to the budget workshop. So I just wanted to point that out, and I don't understand why I was thwarted in my attempt to get that on the budget. But that said, I do support you on that, Councilmember James, and I'd like to take a roll call.
Madam Mayor, it's Scott Smith, city attorney. If you just could, the council's adding this to the agenda will need to pass with a 3/4 vote, and it'll be subject to a finding that the need to take action arose after the posting of the agenda, and that it can't wait till your next meeting. So maybe you or the motion maker could elaborate a little bit on those findings so they could be in the record. I think they can be easily made and by the supermajority added to the agenda.
Okay, yes, Councilmember James, would you like to elaborate somewhat on your motion?
Certainly. The letter that the city manager has received from Sheriff Barnes requires our immediate attention. This is a matter of public safety, and Sheriff Barnes did not indicate how much time we had to respond to the letter. So in that case, I believe it's something that needs to be dealt with this evening, and I would appreciate support from my fellow council members on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for providing that. I think that satisfies.
Findings. Thank you. Yes, that's what I was going to say, Laura. I'm sorry.
Okay, let's take a roll call. Councilmember Ham.
This is Councilmember Ham. I was going to ask that we table that motion for discussion for a second.
Oh, you bet.
Perfect. So I was going to make a recommendation that we bring forward the parking plan that we all agreed to come back at the June 2nd meeting and hear that this evening, if staff is prepared to do that. And then we can make a decision based on that. And the reason I find that that's an emergency item is because we did have some issues or some changes from the Orange County Health Officer on Saturday that would necessitate or lend its help to us reopening our parking lots earlier than next Tuesday.
Okay, please elaborate, Councilmember Ham. I'm not aware of your parking plan or these new revelations by OC Health.
Yeah, so my apologies that you haven't been paying attention to the last council meeting or the OC Health Officer of Orange County, but last council meeting there was a motion approved and passed, and we agendized for June 2nd to have staff bring back a comprehensive parking plan that was similar to what adjacent communities are doing in terms of beach parking, so we can move forward with the plan in place. And then as far as OC Health Officer is concerned, this past Saturday we entered phase 2 with the governor's approval to reopen restaurants and bars, and I think also offices were included in that. Being that that's the case, and we do have a contractor on the pier who needs beach parking, I think that's what would necessitate the emergency discussion.
Thank you. Yes, the governor did come to that conclusion for the counties to be able to do that, to reopen the restaurants and retail as well. And yeah, so that sounds great to me. I don't see any problem with that at all. We need to reopen these. Yes, please, Councilmember.
If I may. And I believe if you speak with City Manager Dunick, I believe staff would be prepared to speak to this evening. They just may not have all the fancy photos and graphs and briefing slides, but I believe they're going to be prepared to speak to this evening.
Yeah, that sounds great. We're talking about reopening the parking lots, so yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing if there were any of these standards, because the county and the other cities didn't seem to have any problem reopening their parking lots, having to follow any standards at all. So let's go ahead and take a roll call. Councilmember Ham?
Yeah, I just want to make clarification. So you seconded my motion, Laura?
No, I did not. I'm sorry, I seconded Councilmember James. So you want to use your motion with the staff coming back to us on June 2nd?
No, I'll clarify again. So I'm going to ask that we move up the staff's plan that was going to come back to us June 2nd to this evening to be able to implement parking changes in the coastal zone for the city of San Clemente. And the reason that's necessitated by emergency this evening is because of the changes that were outlined by the Orange County Health Officer on Saturday.
Okay, do we have a second for Councilmember Ham's motion?
I will second that motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Ward, we'll take a roll call. Councilmember James?
Aye.
Councilmember Ward?
Aye.
Councilmember Ham?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson. That passes unanimous. So do we have this presentation by staff or some input at the moment we can address?
Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson, this is Assistant City Manager Eric Sund. Just to kind of go back at the last regular scheduled council meeting of the 19th of May, council directed staff to come back at the June 2nd. That report was going to be a collaborative report by myself and the Public Works Director, Tom Vonnegut, as it relates to a parking reopening plan. Yes, staff is ready to talk about it, but to Councilmember Gene James's point, we don't have all the visuals to provide. And with that, I'm going to segue to Director Vonnegut to communicate the parking reopening plan. So Tom, if you would, please.
Thank you, Eric. This is Tom Vonnegut, Public Works Director. Let me briefly highlight a potential plan for Council's consideration to open more of our parking resources. Briefly, staff would recommend or suggest for your consideration completely opening up Camino Capistrano, opening that metered parking, completely opening Avenida Calafia, the on-street metered parking, removing the parking restriction on a portion of West Avenida Mariposa by the Mariposa access, completely opening on-street parking in the in the North Beach area, that's Calle de Checa, West Avenida Pico, Boca La Playa, surrounding the Ole Hansen Beach Club. Additionally, opening the North Beach lot along the beach frontage, if you will, down to the North Beach trailhead, and just keeping the central triangle portion of that lot closed. Linda Lane, opening the entire lower parking lot. So as you come down the hill and turn right, it would be closed, but the entire lower lot generally would be open. Pier Bowl, open the entire lower lot, just keep the upper lot closed and remove all parking restrictions on Del Mar and Avenida Victoria. And finally, in the T Street area, open up all of the metered parking on Paseo de Cristobal, that's the street that fronts the ocean there, and take away all of the permit parking restrictions in the T Street neighborhood. And I'm available for any questions.
Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead, Councilmember Ham.
Thanks, Laura. This is Chris. Tom, can we do in every other parking situation similar to what the state's doing at the Pier Bowl?
We can, but I would offer that that's difficult to do because the barricades that we would use or whatever we would use would migrate. It would be a logistical challenge to do that. I would offer, if they were trying to get to a 50%, it's much cleaner to stick with one of those upper or lower parking lots and have that be open. It's possible, but it's a logistical challenge.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, if I could inject at this point.
Yes,
I do
please.
not have video, but I think I do have audio. So I am here for the meeting. I would like, though, to ask Mr. Vonnegut to share some information that I understand that we have learned today with anticipation that this might occur. And prompted somewhat by the fact that we received notice that the state parking lots in their beaches may be going to full capacity, or they have been at 50% capacity heretofore. And so I asked Mr. Vonnegut to check with the other jurisdictions, beach communities in Orange County, to see where they might be moving. Some of them have been at 50% capacity, but I understand that they were considering some additional moves, and that the council may benefit from having an update by Mr. Vonnegut as to what's going on with other jurisdictions.
Yes, that would be great, please.
Great, thank you. So Interim City Manager Dunnick just mentioned the state's potential plans. In addition, it is staff's understanding that by the weekend, the county will open all parking at county beaches. So that's their intention, is our understanding. Currently, it's our understanding that Laguna Beach has removed parking restrictions. Their parking structures are open and they have no more restrictions in their metered lots. Newport Beach has no more parking restrictions. Huntington is at a 50 to 75% level at the attended lots, and the metered lots have no more parking restrictions, and that was hot off the press this afternoon.
Great, thank you, Mr. Vonnegut. Yeah, I mean, I don't see, maybe you could answer this for me. I know I've been trying to get the parking lots open for a month now at 4 different meetings. And now that we hear this news, since it's so important to hear what others do before we do it in San Clemente, what would prohibit us from just opening at 100%? And why would we not do that anyhow, considering, you know, we go to Ralph's and Albertsons, Lowe's, Walmart all the time, and where, you know, parking lots are packed. And I don't know anybody who says that they got COVID-19 from, you know, a car parking next to somebody so closely. So they've been doing this throughout this entire stay-at-home order. But why are we now looking and picking and choosing, you know, what streets and partial parking lots to be open at this point? We're supposed to be reopening our community and reopening the economy here. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Could you explain why we're going to be so different tonight in your proposal, or at least to vote on it?
Well, actually, you know, in preparation for tonight and based on what things were happening even within the last week, most agencies were at a 50% parking level. So we did some thinking about how to do that in anticipation of your council potentially considering this at your next regularly scheduled meeting in June.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So, all right, well, I'd like to consider reopening at 100%. But any, Councilmember Ward, Councilmember James, do you have some questions for Mr. Vonnegut or comments?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment. This is Chris Ham. So, Laura, I think you just heard from staff that other cities, municipalities, government entities are doing a 50% opening, which is contrary to what you just stated 2 minutes ago, that everybody had just outright reopened. The fact that you didn't do your research on what adjacent communities were doing, I think, is pretty concerning to me and probably other residents in this community. So with that, I'll make the motion, if there's no other discussion, that we move forward with staff's plan. And in that, we allow staff to go to full reopening once the state and county makes that decision as well, so it doesn't have to come back to us.
Thank you.
I would second that.
Thank you. If I may have a clarifying question for you, Mr. Vonnegut, you were just telling me that they're opening it at 100% now.
It's our understanding that the county intends to open at 100% by the weekend, but we don't know that for sure, but that is their plan at this point, is what we were told.
Mm-hmm. So by Tuesday, you want, I guess what I'm hearing from the sentiments of council is they want to wait and see what others do before we make that decision. I'm comfortable making the decision at 100%, but I'm fine voting with the rest of them for 50% for the next 5 days till Tuesday, till we see what others do, just to get these lots open so that people can utilize the beach. I had a great time at the beach in Dana Point this weekend. I could easily find parking, and I couldn't do that at my own beach here in San Clemente. So, but I'll take what I can get, and I'm sure others in the community watching tonight can feel the same way about that, because it's right around the corner, it sounds like. So, anyway, those are my comments. Councilmember James, please.
I can be convinced to vote that way, but I want to ask Mr. Vonnegut one question, and that is, can we restrict the parking and still take down every temporary fence that is up? Because they are incredible eyesores, and I'd like to see them removed as soon as possible.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember James. The answer is yes. We would take down all the fence, and any remaining restrictions would be handled by a different flavor of barricade. The fence would be removed.
Thank you. And so if Councilmember Ham could restate his motion one more time, I would like to hear it one more time. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson?
Yes.
This is Laura. I did just receive one comment, so just wanted to give you a heads up. We've got a comment whenever you're ready to hear it.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you. Councilmember Ham, would you like to restate your motion first?
Yeah, first thank you for giving me the opportunity to restate my motion for G. And so first off, I would just like to respond to you, Laura, and let you know that putting words in other council members' mouths is probably not appropriate at this point. And while we are following best practices of the state and the county, I wouldn't say that we're waiting to see what others do. We're trying to provide for the safety of our residents, our staff, and visitors to our beach. That should be our #1 priority. And as far as you going to Dana Point, I encourage you to continue to go to Dana Point's beach. With that, my motion was that we move forward with staff's recommendation. And in that recommendation, we allow staff, when our surrounding beach communities reopen at full capacity, they have the ability to take that action, and it doesn't need to come back to us on June 2nd. And of course, Gene, just to clarify, that does include bringing down the fences.
This is Councilmember Ward. I will second that.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a vote on that. Councilmember Ham?
Aye.
Councilmember James?
Aye.
Councilmember Ward?
Aye.
And Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson is an aye, so that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And let's hear the comment, please, Laura, if you may.
Okay, this email is from Ryan Bork, titled Parking and Sheriff Letter. Letter from Sheriff Barnes required the council's immediate attention, and the city was done a disservice for not properly either noticing an emergency meeting with enough time or not noticing a special meeting. Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson worked hard to try to facilitate this. The fencing needs to come down, parking increased to 50% capacity, and barriers put into place immediately. What happened down at the Pier Bowl was a borderline violation of free speech, and the sheriff's response was overboard and very expensive, having 30-plus deputies there. Signed, Ryan Bork. And that's all I have for public comments.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura, for providing the comments for us tonight. All right, so without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into our fiscal year 2020-21 city budget.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I could just ask Mr. Bonnick one more question.
Oh, yes, please, Councilmember James, go right ahead.
When will you execute the removal of the fences?
Thank you, Councilmember James. We will take care of all of that tomorrow. By the end of the day tomorrow, we should have all of it done.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Excellent question, Councilmember James. All right, so moving into the budget workshop. This is I'm going to open the public hearing and workshop concerning the City of San Clemente proposed budget for fiscal year 2020-21. Laura, could you let me know if we have any comments tonight on this?
We do have public comments, yes.
Okay, we do have public comments. In the budget workshop, would it be fine if I went ahead and heard those comments now? Is that fine? We go ahead and hear those comments?
Are you asking me to read the comments, or are you checking with council? I'm sorry.
Yes, please. If you could read those comments, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, sure. And just a quick sound check. Is Joanne on the line? I know she was having technical difficulties.
I am.
Joanne, okay, all right.
Yes.
So I'll start reading the
I'm
comments.
here.
Got it. Okay.
Thank
The
you.
first comment is from Anita Matos. I understand that the city budget may be even tighter than anticipated, so this request may be one for your future consideration. The San Clemente Parks and Recreation Department can attest to the fact that the sport of pickleball has grown tremendously in our city, and the numbers continue to grow each month. Where 1 year ago I knew about 30 people who played locally, the number on our GroupMe thread has now climbed to over 300. The current court availability cannot meet the demand for playing times with this many players, particularly during the hours of 8 a.m. to noon. There are also many young students and working adults who would like to play after 5 p.m. but with no lighted courts. This is impossible for much of the year. If there are any funds available to be allocated for improvements or additional courts, the usage would definitely be worth the investment. Our group has donated financially to help reline the courts at San Gregorio Park and to add a safety fence between courts. We are eager to work with the city on possibly matching funds for future projects. Thank you for your efforts you've already made to support the pickleball community. At the rate we are growing, we need all the help we can get. Next comment is from John Hutchinson. As a business owner in San Clemente, I look forward to playing pickleball either before or after work at San G Park. We've taken great strides since the humble beginning of the first pilot program at San Luis Rey, and interest has exploded. I've personally donated towards the program's improvement and intend to continue to do so, as well as encourage others in our community to do the same. It would be great to improve our current 8 courts at San G as the home of San Clemente pickleball, as well as safely plan for proper infrastructure for the influx of new players. Pickleball is officially the fastest growing sport in America, and definitely so in San Clemente. I understand the budget is thin, but I feel that with the city's support, we can rally our pickleball community to step up and help improve and expand the grounds. Next comment is from Marty. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. My name is Marty Weinberg. I'm the USAPA Pickleball Ambassador for the City of San Clemente. I play and promote pickleball in San Clemente and the surrounding communities. I also administer a social media site for the San Clemente Pickleball Group. I have witnessed our membership grow from 35 people 16 months ago to 340 today. Our San Gregorio pickleball courts are overcrowded. We are overwhelmed with so many people playing pickleball in our community. Pickleball remains the fastest growing sport in the country, and I'm positive that it's the fastest growing sport in our community as well. The pickleball community is growing, yet our facilities in San Clemente are not. We have a need for more courts. We also have a need for court lights to allow the community to play at night, similar to all the other sports in San Clemente. Due to the short days during the fall and winter months, students and working adults are unable to participate in pickleball on weekdays. They are limited to weekend play. Our pickleball facilities should accommodate the community as a whole. We're hopeful that the City of San Clemente will work with the pickleball community in the near future to accommodate the overwhelming attendance at San Gregorio Park. The pickleball community is asking for the city's support during the city budget meetings and workshops. Next comment is from Linda and Jim Flanagan. In spite of COVID, pickleball is a sport for all ages and is not going away. Tournaments will be big and could come here. The Boys and Girls Club hosted a tournament early this year, and it was a great success. Please plan ahead and allocate funds towards activities for all age groups, including seniors.
The next email is from Jim Dahl. See that the city allocated $1.3 million for their service. How much does the city receive from the billing of the service versus cost of the service? In the past, before the CARES ambulance contract, the city netted almost $1 million per year to reduce the cost of fire service. How much will the city make on the ambulance program net this year? Next email is from Anita Luck. Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Anita Luck. I am a resident and property owner in San Clemente on Marquita. I am writing to you to express the need for additional pickleball courts in the city and the ability for night play with lights. Pickleball is an extremely popular and growing sport in the city and is an excellent form of exercise for people of all ages, including the many seniors who participate and play in the city. Please consider including funds for pickleball expansion in your fiscal year 2021 budget and beyond. Thank you for your consideration. The next email is from Bonnie Barnes. The city's Ridgeline Utility Road in Rancho San Clemente is also advertised as a popular public hiking and biking trail in the city's recreation magazine. It runs 3.5 miles through CAL FIRE's very severe high fire hazard zone, and is the only means of access to a growing number of for-profit transmission facilities such as T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, Crown Castle, American Towers, and SDG&E. City utilities and services include radio transmission facilities, 5 water towers, recycled water facilities, emergency alert sirens, OCFA, and fire alert cameras. Recreational elements include picnic tables, public benches, scenic lookouts, and bike and hiking trails. Under Section 4291A of the California Public Resources Code, the city is required to maintain 100-foot wide fire zones along both sides of the Ridgeline Utility Road at all times. But the city budget does not include funding for this item. For example, the cost of this year's annual weed abatement service for the fire zone area is $18,200. Please adjust the budget to include an annual line item for fire zone maintenance along the city's Ridgeline Utility Road in CAL FIRE's very severe high fire hazard zone in Rancho San Clemente. Funds for fire zone maintenance can be generated from recurring permit fees and leases of business utilities who benefit from the protection that this fire prevention service provides. As San Clemente's residents and guests all benefit from the utilities and services, other revenue sources can include funds from city bike and trail maps, which sell for $3 each, property taxes, and the general fund. The next email is from Kevin Dunnigan, San Clemente City Council. First off, thank you so very much for providing our community with the pickleball courts at San Gorgonio, and thanks also for opening them back up. Having these courts has been such a treasure for the growing San Clemente pickleball community. There are so many of us that own homes and pay significant real estate and sales taxes here in San Clemente that appreciate our dollars going to things that provide value. Understanding that the coming year's budget will be a challenge, I urge you to continue investing in the pickleball infrastructure, as it is a priority that is just beginning to pay dividends for our city. May God bless all of us as we work to stay safe and healthy in the coming year. Next email is from Don Nicholas. Class, class, class. More dedicated pickleball courts are needed. Thank you. Next email is from Kevin Chedez. Dear City Council, we appreciate your support of the San Clemente pickleball community. Given the uncertainty of the COVID-19 impact on our city revenues and expenses, our current fiscal year requests will reflect a conservative dollar amount. We are requesting that the 4 temporary pickleball courts at San Gorgonio Park be converted into permanent pickleball courts for the following reasons. First, there is a very small amount of tennis play at San Gorgonio Park. Second, as we return to more pickleball play, including doubles at a future date, having more hours will spread the play time and enable less traffic congestion and more effective social distancing. Third, this will enable us to establish San Gorgonio as our San Clemente Pickleball Center. Fourth, the pickleball community has proven that they are willing to participate in the funding for permanent pickleball court conversion. This will keep the 2021 costs at a very low level. Thank you for your support and consideration of this relatively small budget request that will provide more pickleball time for the existing 400-plus San Clemente pickleball players, but also enable the future growth of San Clemente pickleball.
Next comment is from Bill Miller. Hello, San Clemente City officials. Please consider for your budget adding costs to make improvements for pickleball play at San Gorgonio Park. We desperately need to have courts 5 to 8 made, permanent pickleball courts. We need stands permanently set up outside of court 7 and 8 with the removal of the lower green tarps in the chain link fence. Thank you for your consideration. Next is from Nate Vance. Dear members of the City Council and staff, I'm concerned about what I've seen on the internet about this year's budget. I've seen that some City Council members are considering double-digit budget cuts for the next year. I've seen everything from 10 to 15 to 20% budget cuts proposed online, including on 1 or 2 of the council members' Facebooks. I would like to know where these large numbers came from, as they seem really random to have come from any specific calculation or analysis. It really seems like an emotional number that sounds good on Facebook, but is just pulled out of the hat and doesn't have any connection to any specific income projections. I'm worried that going down this path for emotional reasons or political points will choke the city and deprive us of important services. Will you please have the council explain where these double-digit numbers come from? Will you also explain what services you are willing to have go away because of these cuts. Next comment is from Bill Hart. City Council and staff, over the past few days, I reviewed the city budget and focused my attention on revenue projections. Why? Because revenue projections lay the foundation for the entire budget. We might discuss spending priorities or even specific line items, but without an accurate revenue forecast, our confidence in expenditures decisions is diminished. Everyone agrees that the economy will be severely impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. However, the depth, duration, and effect on various economic sectors impacted by the crisis are yet to be known. This means there is a tremendous uncertainty in the next year's revenue forecast. For my own curiosity, I looked back at revenue during the 2008 recession and studied revenue loss. I applied those levels of loss to current revenue. As a sanity check, I reviewed the results with Assistant City Manager Eric Sund, and I thank him for his time. Eric and I had both agreed that some of the 2008 assumptions would not apply to the current year. Nonetheless, under the revenue loss scenario of 2008 to 2009, the results are sobering. We could experience as much as a $2.5 million revenue shortfall. I want to emphasize that I'm not convinced we will see such a shortfall, but let's be prepared. We should acknowledge the uncertainty of next year's revenue forecast. I suggest that risk mitigation strategies be adopted as part of next year's budget. Those would include monthly reporting to council of actual revenue and plans for cost containment measures should we experience revenue shortfalls. We hope for the best, but we should prepare for the worst. And the final comment I have is from Ryan Bork. Council has spoken to and personally looked at income scenarios that make sense for the next fiscal year budget. The budget needs to be revised down a minimum of $1.5 million in additional expenditure cuts in order to not run a deficit due to COVID. Assistant City Manager Sund has projected a $2.5 million revenue decline, yet the budget presents a $1 million cut over last fiscal year budget. Assistant City Manager Sund's modest $2.5 million figure seems reasonable based on historical declines such as with 2008 financial crisis. Bill Hart did an excellent job modeling revenues and shared this model with Sund and myself today. He also came up with a reasonable analysis of a $2.5 million decline. Though I think it could potentially be closer to $3 to $4 million, 2.5 is a starting point. The city manager and assistant city manager need to let us citizens know what will be cut if the budget shortfall is even more drastic than anticipated, and what cuts to services this would result in. I'd like to know of a specific plan by the assistant city manager and city manager so we can all go into this next fiscal year with eyes wide open. Sincerely, Ryan Bork. And that's all I have for public comments.
Thank you, Laura, for reading those great, excellent comments by everyone. Okay, so before I have asked staff to provide a presentation, I just wanted to make a couple comments since I've been attacked 3 times tonight by Councilmember Ham. And although it's your First Amendment right to say what you want to say to me, I don't think the public finds that professional or wants to even hear it. So I know you have issues with me, and I don't appreciate those attacks. I think they're rude and inappropriate. So all I'm going to ask you, if you would please just try to be respectful and professional, whether you like me or not tonight. And again, your First Amendment rights are yours. Feel free to continue to do so, but I'm just making a request for you to not to do that tonight. Thank you so much.
So I'll respond.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Laura. I would appreciate the same respect that you're requesting of me, and please do not put words into my mouth as we move forward through this evening, because I don't think it's appropriate for you to be making assumptions on what I'm thinking or what the words that are coming out of my mouth actually mean. I'm being very clear and deliberate with my speech and clarifying my position. And so it's also your free speech to make comments against me. So I guess we're just at a standstill. That being said, I have nothing personal against you. I think we're working well together.
Mayor Pro Tem, can I make a motion to close the public comment?
Please. Thank you, Councilmember Ward. That would be great.
Second.
All right. And we do have to vote on closing public hearing comments. So let me take a roll call, please. Councilmember Ward?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Ham?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember James?
Aye.
Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson, I'm an aye, so that passes unanimous to close the public hearing comment. Thank you again, Councilmember Ward, for bringing that up. Okay, so that said, we've all read the
report, the proposed annual budget report, which is over 300 pages. Thanks staff for providing that to us tonight. I'd like to ask staff to provide a presentation, possibly not too lengthy since we've read it, and it has been posted online for 5 days for people to read, so we can really get to the discussion and questions of staff, because I'm sure all of us have those. So would that be you, Assistant City Manager Sund, to present this?
Actually, I believe our interim city manager is going to start, then I'll take it from there. Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Assistant City Manager. Interim City Manager Janik, would you like to start, please?
Thank you, President Ferguson, members of the City Council. I only have a few brief comments. Then I will turn it over to Mr. Sund to provide the actual presentation to the Council. I have certainly worked with Mr. Sund and staff to try and put together what we believe is a very solid budget for Council's consideration this evening. The one thing I would indicate is that my screen just changed dramatically here. Okay, I get it.
Yes.
Okay, never mind. It's filled up with a slide. So anyway, that being said, I apologize. In my estimation, what we have as an experience that every other city in California and clearly in Orange County is experiencing, and that is a great deal of uncertainty as it relates to budget preparation this year. Of course, trying to forecast revenues is in a pandemic and what is going on with the economy is difficult, to say the absolute least. However, the staff does rely upon outside consultant expert advice as it relates to our revenue sources. I have done that, and others do that in other jurisdictions as well. That being our consultants for both property tax and sales tax, and also obviously getting information from the county's assessor, Mr. Webster Gilroy, as to what he believes the property tax amount might be for this year in terms of the projections that he's using to inform the county's budget for this year as well. That said, I found that our process is certainly one that is consistent with what is going on in the other jurisdictions this year because of the fluid situation that does exist. And just looking at what we might anticipate relative to both sales tax and the transient occupancy tax, I will defer that to Mr. Sund, but I will make a comment simply about our property tax and relate even a conversation I had earlier this week with the Orange County Fire Authority about budgetary issues which they may be having as well. And that is that jurisdiction, but clearly the city of San Clemente is heavily dependent upon the property tax. And the property tax by Mr. Gilroy's I think projection is consistent with what the staff is projecting in terms of this year's budget for our city. And being somewhat more dependent upon the property tax, we will understand its true implications coming in November of this year. And I would say that the council, in moving forward this evening with any modifications that you may choose to make, is that the budget probably will need to have monthly check-ins very clearly in my estimation, which is beyond the ordinary quarterly check-ins that I think has been the tradition in this city. I agree with one of our previous public commenters to that respect. The understanding that the sales tax does come in arrears, and so we're always looking back, but it will be the staff's intention to bring that to council's attention on a monthly basis so that if there is any indication that we need to make any adjustments in whatever slight way that might be, or even more dramatically, then we can do that certainly on a monthly, but I would strongly suggest that the check-ins actually look more on a quarterly basis, and very specifically this year, after the November receipt of property tax revenues, the city would have time, in my judgment, to make sufficient modifications to the budget to ensure that it remains balanced throughout the entire fiscal year. It clearly is uncharted territory for everyone. However, I would commend staff that they have provided a very conservative approach to this budget. There are cuts already projected when you look at year over year in terms of what we anticipate can be done to ensure that we did in fact present a balanced budget to this council. And with that, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, I am going to turn it over to Mr. Sun to provide his presentation to the council.
Okay, thank you so much, City Manager. Assistant City Manager, would you like to present, please?
Thank you, Interim City Manager Dunnick, Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson, and the council members. So it's my pleasure to present to you the fiscal year 2020-2021 proposed budget. As indicated by our Interim City Manager, it is a balanced budget, and it does take into considerations potential impacts as it relates to COVID. But one thing that you'll see consistently throughout this presentation is we're still in a period of not really knowing the true impacts of how that'll affect our fiscal foundation. And so with that, I'm going to start with a quick and be very brief to your point, Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson. Tonight we're doing a budget workshop and a public hearing. We'll be doing a budget overview. We'll look at the department budget highlights. We'll do a brief CIP program overview. We have a couple of city council decision packages that we need some direction on, as we indicated, the public hearing, and then we'll have a period of questions at the end. With regards to the next slide, our budget transmittal. So for fiscal year 1920, we made some accomplishments: implementation of the BPR master plan, safe routes to school projects completed. We successfully expanded the Sound Community Trolley program. We added a 4th firefighter position to Station 50, and then we also, as part of the fiscal year budget 1920, we added 2 additional deputies to the Orange County Sheriff's Department contract. The current issues, obviously, with COVID being one of them, however, our ongoing current issues are homelessness. We continue to address the quality of life issues with homelessness. Proposed toll road, another quality of life issue, and then also, as indicated in the city manager transmittal letter, rising public safety costs related to both police and the fire authority contracts. Our challenges in the future will be cost increases that affect the city's operating position. Next slide. So our budget. The budget helps us organizationally allocate the resources of the company to different departments and activities. It's a plan, but not set in stone, and can be changed as needs are determined. And that goes back to Interim City Manager Dunnick's point. We already do quarterly updates to the council for 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th quarter. We'll be touching bases with council on a monthly basis, specific to our revenues and our expenditures. And by having these periodic check-ins, it will allow us to proactively address any issues that come to realization throughout the year. And as we talked about, we'll have a little bit of that discussion as it relates to November with property taxes. Next slide. I think this is really important because the city has used the long-term financial plan for upwards of 25 years now. And even before COVID was in our horizon, we were dealing with a potential deficit, in that deficit showing its first negative for fiscal year 2021. So going back to 2016-17, we already started the budget theme and the focus of investing in today to protect tomorrow. And as you can see from our themes, every year we've been focusing on preparing for this. And so now for 2020-21, while times are uncertain, the city is holding steady in this environment that seemingly changes on a daily basis. I can't tell you how powerful and how positive that LTFP has been for the city as we present a balanced budget tonight, and we are in a better financial position than a lot of other cities with regards to what we've done to prepare for any type of recession. Next slide, please. As Interim City Manager said, I wanted to give a financial overview of all funds, and I think it's important to note in fiscal year 1920, we had revenues of $139 million, and we saw that was a 3% decrease from the prior budget year, and our expenditures were budgeted at $144 million, which was a 23% reduction from the fiscal year of 18-19. As we move into this new budget year, revenues are being expected to be at 143, which is a 1% decrease from 1920. However, our expenditures are dramatically decreasing as well, 23%. I've provided the page numbers that these all are relative to the budget, but I think that chart in the middle really probably provides a little bit of the cuts that the departments have already taken as it's reflected in this proposed budget. And so for your benefit, you'll see general government, finance, administrative services, community development, marine safety, public works, and Beaches Park all having a reduction in their expenditures. So I commend those departments because it's also important to note while those reductions have occurred, we're still committed to the service levels of our previous fiscal year. So we're not decreasing any services, we're still maintaining those with these cuts. Next slide. And so as I talked about, this is a time of uncertainty, and as you'll see throughout this budget, we have a lot of things in place to help us weather this storm, whether it's well-funded reserves or potentially cost savings with vacancies or other types of things. We are prepared to manage this fiscal impact, whatever it may be. Next slide, please. So the key themes for our budget is going to be that we're wanting to maintain a strong financial foundation. The city maintains a AAA bond rating, and that's something that we take very seriously, and we will not do anything to jeopardize that triple bond rating. As indicated, we have a commitment to our service levels. We are committed to maintaining those service levels. And then the most important thing, I think, is to continue to address quality of life issues. And this council has been very strong in wanting to focus on quality of life issues for the residents and the business community within San Clemente, and that's something that we're going to continue to be positioned to address in the coming fiscal year. Next slide. In my previous agenda report on giving a COVID financial update, I did have an opportunity to provide some cost mitigations. I want to go over those a little bit more in depth just to provide the council with some perspective. So currently in the fiscal year 2020-2021, we have 9 frozen positions, which is providing an automatic savings of $1 million. We've suspended any educational assistance for this fiscal year, which was about $21,000. We've reduced travel and training by almost 50%, which reflects about a $78,000 reduction. The trainings that we've left have been relative to certifications for individuals to maintain their positions, whether it's a water quality operator, etc. We've deferred a number of capital projects, specifically general fund, to maintain a strong financial base. And then as well, we've dealt with the general fund transfer to street improvement fund being reduced a little bit as well to help us weather that. And it's important as I go back to the monthly and the quarterly check-ins. As things come up, whether they're negative or positive, we will have an opportunity to get in front of the council and hypothetically say, okay, we're doing a little bit better than we thought, so let's maybe reinstitute more of this general fund transfer for street improvement funds to do more street projects. Or the converse, we're not doing as well as we thought, and we'd like to reduce that transfer a little bit more this year so that we have enough cushion to maintain service levels. So those mitigation factors will be at our disposal for both negative and positive. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Jake Ron, our Financial Services Officer, who's going to go over the budget overview. And he's going to go kind of quick, and we'll leave questions at the end. Again, Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson, taking into account your request to be as brief as possible, since everyone's had an opportunity to review the budget. So with that, I'm going to give it to Jake. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, Jake.
All right. And like Eric said, this is Jake Ron, the Financial Services Officer for the City of San Clemente, and we'll just keep going. And good evening, and welcome to tonight. So next slide. All right. So first of all, here's a summary of all the funds of the city. It's kind of broken into 2 categories: the governmental funds and proprietary funds. And again, as Eric said, up in the right-hand corner, you'll see the little bit in red, and that's on page 50. Again, the focus that we're going to be spending tonight is mostly on the general fund, which is 47% of all the spending for all funds, and it is the most discretionary spending in nature. And then there are other types of funds, and we'll cover those briefly as well. So next slide. Just for information purposes, all fund summary, the revenues total 143.7 million and expenditures total 150.1 million. And that's typical for this time, or as far as a budget. Expenditures usually exceed revenues because we've got a buildup of reserves or use of things for capital costs. And again, up in the right-hand corner, that's pages 35 and 55. One thing I do want to point out, operating revenues are 140.8 million, and the operating expenses are 131.4 million. So as you can see, the operating revenues do exceed the operating expenses. So we'll just go to the next slide. Again, and this is the spending plan. So this is all the costs kind of broken out by area, kind of alluding to the 47%, again, was the general fund. And the other big area is enterprise funds, and that is primarily utilities, which would be the water, sewer, and other fee-funded activities. So next slide. And this is the general fund revenues and expenditures comparison. Again, here's fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 2021. It's just a summary of where we are. You can see, again, like the other one, revenues are below the expenditures. So we have 68.2 and 69.9 of expenditures. Again, we're utilizing essentially the savings account that Council has referred to before, our fund balance, and using some of those to assist with one-time costs or transfers to reserves. So next slide. So modifying things for the operating position, again, once we kind of back out those one-time costs and one-time revenues, it's 68 million for the revenues and 67.9 million for the expenditures. And again, the 68 million, again, backs out one-time revenues. The 67.9 backs out one-time reserve transfers or costs. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So that gets us to our operating position. Again, the operating revenue, 68,017,380. Operating expenditures, 67.9 million. Again, it's a very tight operating position, about $63,610. So we'll go to the next slide. Pardon me if I'm going too quick, but I'm just trying to keep it moving. So total general fund revenues, we have 68.2 million. And as you can see, most of the categories are down. The only ones that are up are taxes and service charges. Taxes are up primarily because of property tax, and we'll go into that a little bit. And we'll also have a couple of slides on sales tax for information purposes. Service charges, I would say the main reason for the increase there is ambulance service charges. And in total, there's about a $1 million reduction from the adjusted budget. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is kind of a little bit of a historic perspective for property tax. You can see it's grown over time, and next year's budget includes 37.1 million. Again, this is on page 38, and I have a couple other slides that'll cover some of the information related to this. So next slide. So a little bit of past history, fiscal year 2020, 21. The budget, or from the projected amount, is a 3.4% increase, and the adjusted budget increase is 4.2%. So a little bit of perspective, the last couple of years, and this is from our property tax people, you can see the percent changes have been over 5%. So again, we're kind of coming back with what we believe is a conservative number for property tax. And again, kind of like Mr. Dunnick said earlier, the largest receipts to the city actually occur in December and January, and April and May. So next slide. And if you wonder as far as the timing of property tax revenues, property taxes for fiscal year 2021 were set as of January 1st, 2020. So the virus and the resulting shutdown should have little impact on these values or what we receive for the next year. I did add a little caveat that if the shutdown is prolonged and there's reductions, we'll kind of see what's coming down the line over the next 4 to 6 months. But just wanted to add that in there. Again, it's not really going to impact us too much during the 2020-21 year, but what the information that we see over the next 4 to 6 months will kind of let us know what's coming in the 22-23 or 22-23 year. So next slide. And sales tax. Here's a history of the past collection on sales tax. Again, if you look at the revenue that we're budgeting for, is basically back at the 2016-2017 level, and that would be basically the 9.9 is about a 6 to 7% decrease from the 18-19 levels. One thing that I do want to point out is prior to the pandemic and the activity, we were going to come back with a mid-year for higher sales tax this year. Obviously, that's not going to happen this year. So we were actually estimating or going to be budgeting for a much higher number in the 2020-21 year. So again, we tried to adjust down accordingly. So next slide. Again, it's down from the 18-19 actual revenues. It's budgeted at 16-17 levels, and the actual data won't be available until later. And with sales tax, there's a lot of considerations. Again, who are the major sales tax producers? What's the effect of the stay-at-home order? The governor's sales tax deferrals. He allowed some businesses to defer paying their sales tax. So we might be getting some of that a year later. Industry and versus residential makeup of community. There's just a lot of factors that go into sales tax revenue. So we just need to be abreast of that and keep that in mind. Next slide. So this is a little bit, I saw this on a webinar that I was on, and I thought it was pretty good, so I brought it into ours. Basically, the first quarter of 2020, the sales activity that occur in January and March. It's early in the crisis. Again, we would have just gotten the statement released, but the business level data we really don't get that information until June. So here's kind of a little bit of a perspective on how long it takes to receive the money and when we receive information on that. So again, it's just going through quarter by quarter. The second quarter, again, the statement will be released on August 20th, which would be obviously after the fiscal year, but in the business data won't be coming through until September. So a little bit of a time frame as to how long information takes to make it to us, and we really have that analysis down. So next slide. The general fund expenditures by category, as you can see, the budget for next year is just under 70 million. The dollar change is about 9.4 from the adjusted budget, and in total it's about a 12% decrease. And this one is by category. You can see personnel decreases by about 800,000, contractual services by 1.5, and again, all this information is on page 82 of the budget document. So next slide. All right, so the general fund expenditures by department, again, pages are up there, and this one is, again, broken out by department, and you can see general government go. The only departments with increases are police and fire, and those are a 4% and 6% increase. So that's, again, where our focus was. Marine safety, even though it shows there's a decrease, there was that one-time payment for $400,000 to the CalPERS, and then we had the changeover in the marine safety chief, so we kind of reset, I'll call it the staffing levels to a certain extent. We kind of changed steps, grades, all that kind of stuff to deal with that impact. So essentially that 20% is primarily the $400,000 payment that was made on the CalPERS lifeguard plan to reduce future costs. So, and we'll just go ahead, and I'll be going to each of the departments a little bit. Again, general government, it's made up of city council, city manager, city general, city clerk, and economic development. The decrease is about 35%. If you don't include transfers and capital, it'd be a decrease of about 16%. And I'll cover some of the highlights on the next slide. Again, general government, there's the one frozen position for savings of $128,000. Interfund transfers, total 1.4, including the annual street improvement fund transfer, which was lowered to $500,000. And we, again, kind of following past LTFPs and following that financial foundation, we are contributing $830,000 to capital reserves. Election costs are down $186,000, and other amounts included are the DDA, the downtown parking lot leases, and council contingency for $35,000. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Finance and administrative services. Again, this is FAS admin, finance, and human resources. You can see from the adjusted budget, the decrease is about 9%. And that's pretty much across the boards. Down low, if you look at personnel supplies, contractual, other charges, interdepartmental charges, the program budget is about down 9%. And we'll cover some of the highlights on the next slide. So finance and administrative services, personnel, there's 3 frozen position savings, resulting in about $348,000 worth of saving. Contract services decreased by about $78,000. Travel and training, was about 10,000 of that, and professional and contractual services reduction was about 64,000. One thing that I did want to highlight is the RSVP costs were previously under human resources, but we reallocated those over to public safety this year, or we moved those budgeted costs over to public safety. So public safety, again, it's over in total about a 3% increase. You have the 4, the 6, and the negative 20%. Again, you have the one-time costs in there. And I'm just going to, rather than talk about this on a whole, I'm going to go through kind of by program. So next slide. Public safety, the highlights. The police services contract is about 25% of general fund operating costs. The OCSD contract is $7.2 million, with the general fund portion being $17 million. The contract cost increased by $633,000 from the approved $16.4 million budget last year, which includes the MOU negotiations and the police substation costs. No service level changes, and maintains the 2 deputy 2 positions added last year. The police services total, $18.5 million, and that's 27.2 of the general fund operating costs. This is, I'll call it the police services contract and the support services. Again, it's fleet, communication, citation processing, RSVPs, crossing guards, and legal enforcement, and also the UAL payment for the past police officers. So next slide. Public safety highlights. Fire and ambulance service contracts. The OCFA base contract is $9.8 million, or it's 9.7 base, and then there's also the additional facility and vehicle costs. The base contract increases by $548,000, which is a 6% increase. And you might be asking, what about the 4.5? Well, again, above the 4.5% increase cap, there is the included cost for the 4th firefighter phase-in, or 4th firefighter paramedic phase-in. So that's a piece of it. Care ambulance contract is $1.4 million, and that's about 2% of operating costs. Ambulance program budget increases about $101,000. The program provides 2 full-time ambulances. So in total, the emergency services is 11.9, and that also includes the public safety UAL payment for past fire services. And one thing, I believe there was a question about ambulance revenues. The ambulance revenues are about $1.5 million. So that covers, I'll call it the ambulance services and some of the paramedic costs related to OCFA. So next slide. Marine safety. 2.8% of operating costs. Marine safety cost decrease from the prior year. And again, I've already kind of highlighted a couple of times, the $400,000 payment on the lifeguard plan. The funding for the marine safety chief position was, I'll call it, recast at a different dollar amount. We're hoping any savings achieved as a result of that vacancy would be used for additional one-time payment on the pension liability, reducing future cost impacts. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Community development, again, 8% decrease. Community development includes admin, building, planning, and also code compliance. So you can see the personnel supplies, contractual service, other charges, and interdepartmental costs, and all this information is on page 124. So next slide. One thing I do want to point out, highlight, the Park Ranger program was reclassified from code compliance, or to code compliance from recreation. Currently, there's no vacancies. Contract services decreased by about $895,000. Some of that is, again, travel and training, clerical services, contractual and professional services. Some of those are one-time, but some of it's also inspection, plan, check, review, contract services, and then also some legal decreases there.
And if I can jump in really quick, this is Assistant City Manager Sun. One of the things I think it's important, if we can go back to that slide really quick, thank you. We had plans originally in our proposed budget to really, if you remember, we did the Park Ranger program as a pilot program within community development under our code compliance manager. And park rangers are now able to write parking citations for parking violations in parking lots. And in light of COVID, they've taken on some new responsibilities. We had originally planned on presenting some enhancements within the Park Ranger program so that they could operate at a higher level. And as I went back to my conversations about quarterly and monthly check-ins, it's really important because some of those things that we would want to institute within the Park Ranger program would be a benefit to the city as it deals with quality of life issues. But in light of COVID, we've pushed pause on everything. And so I do anticipate coming back to the council at some point during the next fiscal year when things are looking better, with the hope that things will look better, and looking at doing some things to enhance the Park Ranger program so it can run more optimal for the demands that the city is kind of needing out of that service. And so, again, we didn't do anything within the budget to enhance because we wanted to kind of hunker down and take a cost savings approach so that we could weather this storm. But as with any storm, it will pass. And when it does, that's something that we'll bring back to the council for further discussion and policy direction.
All right, so next slide. All right, Public Works. Public Works is comprised of Public Works Administration, Engineering, City Maintenance or Facilities, and Beaches Parks Maintenance. And again, there's kind of a list of personnel, supplies, contractual services, other charges, interdepartmental charges. So we'll go to the next slide and go through some of the highlights. Again, personnel, there's 2 staffing vacancies, frozen position savings of about $315,000. Contract services decreased by about $1.2 million. That includes travel and training, about $24,000, maintenance of trees of $81,000, maintenance of facilities decreases $181,000. And one thing I do want to point out, some of that was maintenance for items done at Presidio. You might recall as part of last year's approval, 150 was approved as a decision package. Other contractual services decreased $828,000. And again, a big portion of this is the SC rides. We have it budgeted, and we typically carry that forward year by year. Capital outlay, again, is lower by $3 million. Recurring maintenance is still included. We have major maintenance, slurry seal facilities maintenance, sidewalk improvements, and those things are still kept in there. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Beaches, Parks, and Rec, again, is made of admin and recreation. So personnel, supplies, contractual services, other charges. Again, the decrease is about 2% in total. So we'll just go through the highlights. Next slide. Again, one staffing vacancy, frozen position savings about $84,000. One thing I'll point out, the park rangers were moved over to code compliance. We have budgeted for the part-time position, supplies decreased $8,000. Contract services decreased by about $100,000. That includes some travel and training reductions, maintenance costs, utilities costs, and some other contractual services, contract services. And $50,000 of the contract services is the one-time study. So, next slide. And again, I just want to reiterate, and we've kind of covered this in detail before, but basically I'll call it the old budget process was almost kind of static. You adopted the annual budget, and then what I did put next to it, the new budget process, again, you would adopt the budget. There would be constant review of revenues and expenditures. Budget revisions would be recommended. It would kind of be a little bit more of a changing thing based on monthly or updates throughout the course of the year. And again, just kind of, we said it earlier, a budget is a plan, and the plan can always change. And we're looking for changes throughout the year based on actual activity. So next slide. So where's all this get us? Basically fund balance, which is, I'll call it the savings account. Again, we're not touching our emergency reserve. We're actually increasing it, keeping it at the 20% level. So we're adding $200,000 to it. Unassigned, again, it's going from the $4.8 million and it's going down $2 million. And primarily the easy way I think of it, the $2 million is essentially transfers to reserve and one-time costs. So we're estimating that at the end of 2021, there would be about $2.8 million. And all this is on page 83. Again, as I said, the general fund is the main operating fund of the city. We do have other funds. We have the street improvement and gas tax funds. Some things I wanted to point out. We have lower revenues budgeted to reflect the current environment. However, fund balance is available if needed. Some of the big capital projects are the Del Mar Street Rehab, South ECR, and Camino de las Maras. And again, these are kind of in the CIP section. We can talk about them a little bit later. Air Quality Improvement Fund, again, we have the trolley operation, police grants fund. It funds a portion of the one deputy position. The Public Facilities Construction Fee Fund, the Orange County Sheriff's Department substation, the Reserve Capital Projects Fund, that's where we'd be doing the Beach Trail Steel Bridge replacement. And then one thing I did want to point out, we still end the year with about $10.1 million in capital reserves and about $700,000 for accrued leave reserves. So next slide. And again, since the enterprise are kind of big funds, we're calling out just the operating piece. Again, there's capital components and all that kind of stuff. But for comparison purposes, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. The water sewer funds, water operating costs essentially go down a little bit. It's $23.5 million to $23.4 million. Sewer operating costs stay flat at about $11 million. One thing that we're going through right now is the sewer cost of service study. Clean ocean operating costs go from about 3.6 to 2.5, and that's primarily due to one-time transfers to support projects. And then we have the golf operating costs, which are just going up incrementally. So, next slide. And then I'll go ahead and cover this really quick, but Tom Vonnegut is available for any questions. We'll touch briefly on the capital improvement program. Next slide. Again, 20 new projects, 17 million. Some of the significant projects that we want to call out and we know council is interested in is the Orange County Sheriff Department substation and the Beach Trail Steel Bridges replacement. And updated information, again, it's all on sanclemente.org. So Tom's available for any questions on that, if you have any questions. Budget enhancements. There were some decision packages included in the budget. A lot of them are actually outside of the general fund, and the ones in the general fund, go ahead, go to the next slide. are actually one-time revenues coming in, so they're actually benefiting the general fund. Again, we'd be reimbursed for some costs related to the upgrade from Trackit, and then also the radar vehicle traffic counters. There's a $7,000 cost there. General fund totals about $94,000.
If I can interject, this is Assistant City Manager Sund. As it relates to that upgrade Trackit for community development, there's two bonuses to this. One, we're getting grant monies to offset these costs. And two, as part of this upgrade, the reason we find it so important is it will provide more remote mobility for applicants to apply online with submittals for their plans and so forth. And so this is a really important investment that had been called out on our IT strategic plan. And now, in light of COVID more than ever, we want to be able to implement that enhancement to make it easier for the public to do business with the city without having to leave their home, their office, etc.
And just to point out, there's really no ongoing decision packages that would affect the general fund. We just want to point that out. Next slide. And most of the cost increases or the budget enhancements are for IT as part of the Information Technology Strategic Plan. Again, these are one-time. It's GIS, video system, park ranger, technology improvements. And one thing I do want to point out, as far as telecommuting and getting things done from home, IT has been instrumental, and I think one of the things that has benefited us greatly is the IT strategic plan and doing that. So, okay. And with that, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide.
So, Assistant City Manager Sund, as it relates to these two next slides, we thought it would be important to touch in with council on some items that had been given previous direction by the City Council, because now we're at a point where a significant investment will needed to be funded in order for these items to continue. And so, if you can go to the next slide, I'm going to ask that if Cecilia Gallardo-Daly, the Community Development Director, can come on and communicate these two items. And it's important to note that these dollar values are not in our current proposed budget, but as part of tonight's discussion, if the council is so inclined to give direction to staff to incorporate these one-time charges into the budget, we will do so when we bring back the budget for adoption at the June 2nd council meeting. And so with that, Community Development Director Cecilia Gallardo-Daly, are you okay with giving an overview, please? Give her a moment to unmute. Give her a second, and if not, I'll go ahead and run through these presentations. Okay, well, if she comes on, she can pick up. So the first item, the council had provided direction to the staff to look at doing zoning to permit hospitals in additional sites throughout the city. So it was initiated by the City Council in 2019 of January. December of 19, the Planning Commission study session for 2 zoning options. What we are needing to do is a addendum to the general plan EIR, and that additional cost would be $90,000 to complete that. So there's kind of 2 questions in front of the council. A, do you want to continue with this previous direction? And B, if you do, we'll have to appropriate $90,000 in the proposed budget. And so with that, I'll take pause and let the council communicate anything, and hopefully Cecilia, I think she's on now, she'll be able to answer any questions.
Cecilia, are you on? Doesn't appear as she's here yet.
Told us she was, but why don't we do the other item, and then hopefully she'll be on by that point, and we can have council discuss both of them. Next slide, please. So the other item is the Rancho San Clemente public safety uses. And so if you remember, there was an item in August of 2019 initiated by the council to do a site-specific amendment as it related to the Rancho San Clemente Business Park. So to continue with that council direction, there would need to be an appropriation. It's a little bit over 200,000. Well, excuse me, it's 133,000, or 113, I'm sorry. In that, it would include the CEQA technical study, which is an estimated 77,000, and then it would also entail a CEQA EIR addendum at 20, and a parcel map at 16 for $113,000 total. So those are the two items with the two appropriation asks, one of 90,000, one of 113,000. I'll pause to see if Cecilia's on to address any questions that the council may have.
Mayor Pro Tem, this is Councilmember Ward. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So, Assistant City Manager, can we possibly not talk about this tonight, but put it on our closed session for June 2nd, our next council meeting next week? Would that be okay? Because we're not making a decision today.
No, so Councilmember Ward, you're absolutely, there's no reason that you have to make a decision tonight. We wanted to try to make it as efficient and convenient as possible, but if the council wanted to direct us to bring this back and have a discussion in closed session, we could always, and again, like we talked about with the budget every month, we could come back at a later time and deal with these appropriations if the council was so inclined to do so. So there's no issue with having that discussion on our next closed session meeting.
Okay, and I also would ask for maybe the item number 1, the hospital zone overlay, that we also talk about that in closed session.
Thanks, Councilmember Ward. What would be the merits of having both these items in closed session? I guess we'll start with the first one, the Rancho San Clemente, or the number 2 that you mentioned. Why would that be in closed session, since we initiated that in public session last year?
We did initiate it, but it was a closed session item that we did have a discussion on. So there are some serious legal implications in it, and I think we should just double back and see if we still want to do these, go forward or not go forward. So I think it's a good closed session topic, and then if we aren't going to go forward, certainly that will be a public item.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward. City Attorney, could you weigh in so we can have your legal opinion on that? I have no problem with it. I'd just like to make sure we're doing it appropriately in accordance with the law.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Thanks for the opportunity to weigh in. Certainly, as you said, Mayor Pro Tem, the action to initiate a specific plan amendment or a change is a public action. Part of the basis for this action, however, was a legal challenge to the adequacy of the city's SB2 ordinance, an assertion that the city had inadequate sites for homeless occupancy. And so we could cover that narrow issue. Actually, that litigation is pending and is on already the discussion for Tuesday. So we could cover that narrow part in closed session. And then, as you suggested, certainly vet the remainder in public.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Scott. That sounds good. How about the other one on the hospital, item number 1?
This one also related to the city's opportunity to acquire, either by purchase or sale or by condemnation, the current San Clemente Hospital site, the abandoned site, or other land that might be suitable for the operation of a hospital. So for that very same reason, the possibility of the acquisition through purchase and sale or condemnation, we could have that narrow discussion in closed session and then look at this broader land use redesignation opportunity publicly.
Okay.
However the council directs on that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Well, since this has come up, City Attorney, should we vote to do that at this time?
Well, yeah, I would appreciate that, Mayor Pro Tem. If you could take that action, then we would put that, we'd have that consensus. As I said, the lawsuit already has to be on the lawsuit or on the closed session, but to do the initiation one, we could also do that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, City Attorney. And Councilmember Ward, would you like to make that motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I do appreciate staff putting this on. I think it is good for for us to see, that these are decisions we need to make because they are further expenditures, and so we are talking about our budget. So I do appreciate that, but for the record, I will make a motion that for the 90,000 for the hospital zone overlay, that we do move that to closed session, and we talk about it narrowly, like the city attorney said. And number two, that the dog park, the rezoning of Rancho San Clemente, that item also be agendized for the next session. And then we'll definitely discuss it when we start doing our budget approval.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Ward. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Councilmember Ham. Let's go. Is there any further discussion on this before I take a roll call on the vote? Okay, hearing none. Councilmember Ward?
Aye.
Councilmember Ham?
Aye.
Councilmember James?
Aye.
And Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson is aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you so much. Is Cecilia
Mayor Pro Tem.
with us now?
She's on now. She's with us.
Okay.
He is with us.
I apologize.
Thank
I
you.
have technical difficulties.
So with that, if we can go to the next slide, please. Keep going. Okay, so now that kind of concludes our overall presentation related to the proposed budget. We'll push pause and allow for questions or comments, and just want to let the council know that we have all of the directors and relevant managers. If questions come up specific to a department, we'll bring those individuals on to address your questions. But at this point, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Okay, great. Thank you very much to all of you for presenting tonight on this. So let's go ahead and open this up for staff, for any questions of staff, and I'll go ahead and call for any questions before I do. Do we have any, Council?
I have some questions.
Okay, please, Councilmember Ham.
Yeah, so first off, I'd just like to address some comments that you made earlier, Laura, that you feel slighted by the comments I'm making this evening. I want to recognize and thank you for your appreciation of my First Amendment rights. But I just want to say that I think you and I are working very well together, and I think we see eye to eye on more issues than we don't. A perfect example of that is just like when Gene and yourself voted to close San Clemente City beaches, I also had to go to the city of Dana Point to get my surf fix in at county and state beaches. So with that, I do have some questions of staff. It would be directly at Eric, our city manager. Eric, we as a council directed you to do 3 things in this budget, and I'd just like you to address those. The first one is we asked you not to make any cuts to public safety. We asked you not to dip into reserves before making cuts in other areas, and not to do any large CIP projects. Can you just address how you've handled those issues in this budget as you've proposed?
Yes, Councilmember Ward, Councilmember Ham, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. So yes, with both the police contract and the fire contract, we have done nothing to the service levels. They maintain the same service levels as we have had in the previous year. With regards to reserves, I'm very proud to say that we were able to fund all of our reserves with our balanced budget. So all of our reserves are getting funding. And yes, we have held off on a number of large ticket items relative to CIPs. However, I think it's important to note, and I had a discussion with a citizen the other day, one of the CIPs projects is our Mariposa Bridge. And I know Tom's on the line, but one of the things that we deliberated with quite a lot internally was this bridge has been closed for some time, and it's a major amenity to the city of San Clemente and the residents as it relates to the beach trail. And knowing that if we didn't do something with the bridge, we would have potential issues within the public and the community as to that amenity not being replaced. But we had to figure out a way not to fund it with new general fund monies. But by the very fact that this council, through previous actions and proposed current actions, are funding reserves, we'll have adequate reserve funding to replace the bridge in this coming fiscal year. So those are the reasons we do the reserves, to not hit our current general fund unassigned fund balance, but basically use the reserve to fund those critical infrastructure needs that need to be addressed. And the bridge is a great example of that. And I know Tom is looking at a lot of different ideas and options. One of the things that you're going to see within our budget is projects that have lower maintenance costs. And so where we can do things that will reduce our ongoing maintenance costs, that also will provide a cost savings to the city. And so I know Tom is very cognizant of that as he's looking at that bridge. But getting back to your main point, Councilmember Ham, yes, we were able to achieve all of those three directional by the council.
So great job, and thank you very much, staff, for your great work in these very difficult times.
Thank you, Councilmember Ham. Any other questions from council?
This is Councilmember Ward. I don't have any questions. I called staff earlier today and they answered all of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember James, before I ask some questions, would you have some questions of staff?
I do have some questions of staff, and I'm not, I probably, maybe it's a result of being a neophyte here. I probably will save most of my questions for one-on-one with Assistant City Manager Sund or whoever the appropriate director is. A couple things. I'm a great believer in zero-based budgeting. I talk about it all the time. It works in the private sector. It works for nonprofits. Have we justified, for Assistant City Manager Sund, this is not an I gotcha question, but I would like to get your thoughts on it. Have we justified in your mind every expense that we're going to have going forward?
Councilmember James, the answer is yes. And one of the things, and I have to give a little bit of a shout out to the previous Assistant City Manager, Paul Garrison, who brought the LPFP to the city. One of the things that Paul taught me was we go through every budget line item of every department budget, and we look at every line item, whether it's copy budgets, supply budgets, training budgets, and we go through. So in essence, we do look at it from a zero-based perspective. And so both myself and Jake have gone through the budgets for all the departments, and where we've seen areas that we believe can be reduced, we've worked with the directors to do such, to present to you a balanced budget. And so we, the financial staff, feel very confident with regards to our proposed budget before you tonight.
Okay. One of the things I saw, and I'm sorry I can't find it. It's buried here somewhere. Is there was a statement that said, as employees employees depart, I'm paraphrasing, that you do a study of if that position's needed any longer. I love that concept, but I guess I'm making more of a statement than I am a question here. But I would think we'd be looking at every position all year round on whether positions are needed or not. I got to tell you, from my perspective, we thought we had this 10-foot invisible monster on its way to be nearly a species-ending event. Well, that didn't turn out the way some of the experts told us it was going to turn out. But what is going to turn out is an unprecedented economic meltdown. And I have significant concerns on whether the modest reductions we have. I applaud the staff. I mean, this is a lot of work here. I totally get it. But there was a writer, an author that wrote in tonight about 15% cuts. It's probably that they were probably talking about me, because what I would have liked to have seen, and I know we've never done this before, but again, as the neophyte looking at it a slightly different way, what I would have liked to have seen is what does a 5% cut look like? What does a 10% cut look like? What does a 15% cut look like? Because I'm looking at future budgets, and in the out years, 2 through 5, we're looking at a $12 million deficits, And I'm just wondering if we shouldn't start preparing for those deficits now rather than preparing for them in the future. I mean, year 5 was like a I don't have it in front of me, but a $5.6 million deficit. Mr. Sun, if I could just get you to comment on that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Councilmember James, Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson, and the rest of the council members. So you make really good valid points, and I had an opportunity to have a conversation with a constituent yesterday who did a really good job of putting together some models and looking at some different things. I think, you know, as the assistant city manager and at the end of the day, the FAS director, and working with our finance team, it's our job to do the best that we can to present a balanced budget that's realistic and not a pie in the sky, and be able to maintain service levels. At any time, if the council wants to communicate or redirect service levels, the staff is absolutely poised to address those and adjust the budgets as necessary. At this time, it's our professional opinion that I don't believe we do need to do any modeling because we don't know what to model for. We really don't know what to model for. And a couple of things I think are important to point out. We take such a conservative approach with our revenues, and we've always done that to where we typically underestimate the amount of revenues that we're going to get because we'd much rather be caught with a win than a loss. And before COVID, we were prepared to do a mid-year budget presentation where we were going to be asking to raise our sales tax based on the numbers that we were seeing from a performance standpoint. Now, one thing that economic forecasters have told us on multiple platforms is the rebound from COVID pandemic will be a lot quicker than the rebound, let's say, from the 2008 recession, which had more of a mortgage issue related to that recession. However, with us, we're already seeing stage 2 fully open now for both dine-in and retail, but there are some limitations that don't make it 100% back to normal. But at the end of the day, those sales tax are starting to accumulate again. And one thing I think it's really important that from a sales tax position, some of our biggest sales tax providers in the city are essential businesses that never closed. And so we're really curious when we meet back with HDL in July to see how the second quarter looks. I think we're expecting that those essential businesses, which are top performers in our sales tax portfolio, are going to really perform well because a lot of people were going to those locations because the other smaller businesses that may have not been categorized as essential were unavailable for them to shop. And so whether it's your Targets, whether it's your Walmarts, we're expecting to see some increases in those sales tax. But again, going back to your comment, we have so many things in place within this budget to absorb any impacts. I go back to our vacancy in positions, and that's really the beginning of your question. We, the City of San Clemente, have always practiced when a position becomes vacant, we stop, we step back, and we reevaluate the responsibilities of that position and the division and how it operates. And in some cases, we may say we don't need that position anymore, and we may take those responsibilities and hypothetically disperse them to other staff within the organization and potentially reclassify them. That's a form of retention within our existing employee base and offers some promotion opportunities if we can absorb those positions. In other cases, we may come back and say, we need to do this differently with a different type of position. That may be a less expensive position potentially. In light of COVID, as every position becomes vacant, we already have 8 vacant positions, it's going to be incumbent upon myself and the interim city manager to manage the council's expectations, because one of the things that I've communicated to all the staff is while we have less staff to do the job, an employee at the end of the day, and I use this analogy a lot, has a plate, and they can, when they're going to the buffet, they can only put so much food on that plate. And at a certain point, food starts to fall off that plate. I don't want any employee to have food fall off their plate. I want them to prioritize with their director and myself and the city manager to ensure they're doing the services that are critical to our organization and communicate to the council so the council's aware of how staff are operating with the less resources that we have. And I have to give a shout out to the staff because this organization historically has always done less with more. And I think if you look at our personnel tables and you look at where our FTE count is, we've never had a large growth in our full-time employee base because we've always been an organization that runs conservative and lean. And so we don't have a lot of layers. And every director has to roll their sleeves up and do work just the same as a manager here. And so I think with our cost-saving measures of vacancies, I think if we have to change any dials with potential transfers to some funds that can hold off and have plenty of funding to do street improvements or do other things, we'll be able to turn those dials without taking away services from the public. But at any point in time, if the council wants to communicate where they would like to see service level priorities be emphasized, and you've already done that to a degree with public safety, and I think this budget's addressed that issue. But if there's other direction for non-public safety services that the council would like to communicate or prioritize to staff, we stand ready. But again, it's our opinion that we've done the right finance budgeting to absorb these impacts that we don't know what will be until they happen. And so come November, we're going to be able to tell you a lot more as we've anticipated within this budget. But I think we have enough tools in our toolbox to be able to continue to provide services while maintaining a balanced budget. Now, your question for future years, absolutely. Over the next couple of months, we're going to be looking at new revenue opportunities. That's going to be important for us because we need more revenue. And there are some things within the council's purview that can get you there. We've got a property for sale at Vista Hermosa La Papata that we'll be deliberating on, and that will bring significant cost savings ongoing as well as one-times to help us in future years. And then we've also listed 100 Presidio, which the council has kind of communicated the favorable use would be a hotel, which too would provide ongoing TOT revenue. So there's some major projects that are really close to coming to fruition, specifically Vista Hermosa La Papata, where we'll be able to actually reap some financial benefits that will protect us in future years.
So
I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you. I got just two more things, but I'll probably be reaching out to you because I probably have 50 things to talk about. But I don't want to take your time, everyone's time tonight. One thing, in regards to revenue, in regards to what comes in, particularly with sales tax, this is a two-part question. Do we actually see what retailer that sales tax dollar or dime, whatever it is where that's coming from? And my second question is South Dakota versus Wayfair from 2018. Have we seen a significant increase in sales tax revenue as a result of that Supreme Court decision?
So I'll first back up. So yes, we do. Your question about every sales tax transaction or quarterly results. We do see every business in San Clemente as it relates to their individual sales tax contribution on a quarterly basis. However, with that said, state law prohibits us with sharing that information because it is confidential and proprietary. But through a confidentiality agreement with our HDL sales tax advisors, when we meet with them quarterly, they do provide that overview, as well as good example is if a business, and I'll use if business A has multiple locations, one in San Clemente, one in, let's say, Laguna Niguel and Aliso Viejo, and they misreport one quarter of their sales tax and it goes to Aliso Viejo, our HDL tax advisor finds that error and gets it readjusted in the next quarter so that allocation comes back to us. But we monitor that on a quarterly basis with HDL. Your second part of your question had to do with Wayfair. Yes, that will affect us positively. That's currently going through the state as it's reviewing the formula of dispersed distributions for all of the agencies or local cities that are affected by that. And so we will see those, I'll say the fruits of those labor within the next year.
So the state has been collecting that for a year and a half now, but they have not dispersed it down to the city level. Is that correct?
To a degree, yes. They collected some of it, but they're working on the procedures of distribution and the methodology. And so the state has to go through that and we'll be dispersing it, but they're not holding on to it for much longer.
Thank you, Mr. Sun. I will spare everyone my other 50 questions, and with that, thank you, sir. And that's all I have, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Councilmember James, if I may, of course, when you're ready to sit down, we would love to sit down with you. I have Jake over here as a CPA who loves to talk numbers every day of the week, so we would love to do that.
Oh, one editorial comment on the budget document that we have. In the fiscal year 2019-2020 accomplishment by department, it would be wonderful if each of these bullet points had savings, had cost, had return on investment, and if it was required by law. That's my only editorial comment. Otherwise, it's a great document. Thank you, sir.
Understood, and thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilmember James, for your questions. All right, so I have a couple of questions just regarding some of the revenue. As you know, I work for a coastal city myself, and in the city where I work, they've realized quite a bit of projections early on, and we're similar size, geographic size, and population, and also rely very heavily on property tax, even more so, in fact. About 43 million in property tax, similar size budget, so quite a bit more than us here in San Clemente. But not that they're right, because there's a lot of uncertainties, but the fact that they're projecting 4 times the revenue reductions in the next fiscal year than we are. So I guess I'm just interested in knowing what kind of methodology or formula you used to be able to derive this $1 million loss. Could you let me know?
Are you talking property tax, or what tax type are you talking?
Just overall, our revenue reduction.
Okay. Again, each city is differently, and it's hard to, I'll call it, do a blanket statement for any city. Cities operate differently. I mean, even us from, I'll call it, a police and fire, from the expense side of things. We have contract services. There's other cities out there. So I would say trying to draw distinctions between cities can be a little bit hard. Again, on the revenue side, our property tax is pretty solid. Let me go through the revenues a little bit. And again, some of the revenue assumptions are actually in the document. But,
I've seen them.
Yeah, we just kind of went through item by item, looked where things are going, and when collections actually occur. For business license tax, I know most of our receipts actually occur in the March-April timeframe. So again, that was prior to the pandemic. So that other city, if they have most of their collections right now, I could understand theirs would be much more severely impacted. So without understanding each individual city's process, when they collect revenues and when things are accepted, it's kind of hard to do broad generalizations. I can just let you know that staff did take a look at it, and we will continue to take a look at it on a monthly basis and provide council regular updates. Okay. And again, things are constantly changing on a daily basis. Just to point out, even council's actions tonight regarding parking, again, that has revenue effects for next year. Because I mean, just from, I'll call it a finance perspective, I was thinking, okay, you know what? Are we not going to, because we did the analysis, we kind of came up with that 2.5 million estimate of what was the effect was going to be this year, and we kind of had ongoing lower collections because of the closure of the parking lots. So we're just constantly going through that analysis and taking a look at them each individually, and that's basically what I can say, just analyzing when collections occur and doing our best as far as projecting what's going to happen in the future. So.
Okay. I guess I wanted to get at what particular methodology did you use to look at the revenue reductions for the next year, even the current year where we're expecting 2.5 million?
Again, we just kind of went through it. If there's specific ones, we could address those specific ones, but just doing a broad-based general discussion in total, it's kind of hard.
Okay, that's fair enough, fair enough. Thank you, Jake. I guess my second question for staff would be for probably Tom Vonnegut regarding the capital improvement projects. And at the May 5th council meeting, we had a unanimous vote to look at seeing a list of any CIP projects that we could defer in the next year. Were we able to do any of that?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson. This is Tom Vonnegut, Public Works Director. Yes, we did defer some otherwise planned projects, and I'll make sure to work with Assistant City Manager Sun. We did do that. I don't think it's specifically broken out in your draft budget document, but we can get that to you.
Okay, that would be great. And along those lines, some residents had asked about the bridge, the Mariposa Bridge, that's going to need repairs. Did the city's insurance cover any of that?
We are still working with our insurer and the adjacent property owner on that, and a number of just complicated issues. And so because this effort will take some time, including the permits, which judging by other similar projects are taking a long time, while we continue to pursue the ultimate replacement and potential insurance reimbursement or adjacent private property owner involvement, our effort is going to be on what we can do perhaps for an interim temporary repair to at least get it safe to open it so we can restore that amenity on a temporary basis while we continue to work towards the permanent repair.
Okay, thank you, Tom, for answering that question. Also, just one more question before we go to discussion, unless there's more questions of council. Every budget must state in its adopted budget that has a constitutional limit on revenue the city can take in, as well as how much it can spend. I didn't see that in this budget, or if that is planned for the final budget that's going to come to council, but where the appropriation limits is in this budget. That's in accordance with the government code. It's 37200. Do you know if we plan to include that statement?
Yes, that actually comes as a separate action or an agenda report. Again, if you look at page 255 or 275 and 276, again, we kind of leave a blank page in there. It gets inserted into the final budget, but we bring that as a separate action to council. And I would say most cities are very high above their rate, so that would not be an issue in any way or circumstance. So.
Okay, thank you, Jake. Thank you so much. Does council have any more questions of staff before we have some discussion on the budget?
I have one, and
okay,
that is Mr. Sun and I spoke about this yesterday, but it's been 7 years since we have gone out to market to look for insurance. We're currently with the JPIA. We're not required to be with the JPIA. It seems like 7 years is a long time without looking at what our options are. And not only that, but the complete risk financing piece of what insurance would look like. What do we self-insure ourselves for? What kind of umbrella policies do we have? You know, on general liability, we're paying first dollar in general liability. On workers' comp, we have a $300,000 self-insured retention. Those may be the right things to do, but I would ask that that staff takes a look, at least put it out into the marketplace, and see if we can reduce the cost of risk. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson, if I may add to Councilmember James's comments, if that's okay. Thank you, Councilmember James bringing that up, and I know we had a good discussion the other day with our risk manager. If the council is so inclined to do so, one thing that I had an opportunity to communicate to the council today as it related to some questions that the council member and Mayor Pro Tem brought up. In 2013's LTFP, the city basically did exactly what you're recommending today, Councilmember James, is told the city to go look at other providers to see if we could get a better deal. As part of that action in 2013, the city hired Bickmore, who is a risk management consulting firm, to do just that for the city. And then in 2014's long-term financial plan, staff brought back the findings with Bickmore to the city council, and in 2014, council took action to remain with the CJPIA. What I would say that is, if there was a want by the council for us to do this, we would be more than happy to do so. However, we do not have the in-house expertise to conduct such an RFP, so we would be asking the council to appropriate dollars to hire a consultant to do the RFP for us. And there's a lot of things, and these are specialty consultants. There's a number of them besides Bickmore. There's Alliance Services and so forth, but we would want to hire one of those consultants to basically conduct the RFP, manage that process, and then bring back the results and recommendations to the city and the city council. I did have an opportunity to talk to my staff. We anticipate that if that was the want of the council, that we would probably be looking somewhere around $35,000 in consultant fees to perform that RFP from beginning to end. And that's an approximate cost just based on looking at what we paid Alliant for, Bickmore, what we paid for in 2013, which was about $20,000. But our portfolio is a little bit more complicated than it was 7 years ago. So cost of living and our portfolio would probably dictate somewhere between $30,000 to $35,000. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I have one more question for Jake. I should have asked it earlier. It was regarding TOT. I know a lot of folks have been wondering, believe it or not, if they can travel again, and asking if vacation rentals and hotels, or, well, I know hotels are, but vacation rentals haven't been. But could you walk me through how we came up with, I believe it was 6% decrease in the transit occupancy taxes from the COVID-19 pandemic, and how we arrived at, I believe it was 6%.
Again, everything was stay at home. It's just taking a look at activity. We're still getting some receipts in. We're anticipating, again, less activity next year. That's one of those ones we'll have to pay attention to on a monthly basis and see where receipts are coming in. It's essentially an estimate, but again, I would say TOT as compared to Dana Point or some of the other cities is not a substantial amount to the city of San Clemente. It's about $2.5 million. So any increase or any off amount would not be a substantial effect to the city of San Clemente. Again, we're looking for a possible rebound and a reopening. Again, you guys talked tonight about phase 2. Again, we're in June, so hopefully at some point in the near future, phase 3 will open, people will get more comfortable, things will go, I'll call it, a little bit back to normal, and there won't be as much of a dramatic effect on that one. For the projected amount, we did lower it substantially. I want to say we have an agenda or a report coming to council soon that addresses where we are currently in the current year, so we can give you that update then.
Okay, thanks. I just was curious how we came up with the 6%, though. Was it based on the number of vacation rentals we have and vacancy rates and the number of months? What played into that?
Again, we're just lowering our estimated activity. Who knows where things are going to be in a year from now? I would say the peak season is obviously during the summer, but we would also be, if things go back to normal, we would also benefit next year, I would say during the June timeframe, and we would have a better idea as we progress throughout the year. So. Okay,
thank you very much, Jake. Do we have any more questions of council for staff before we have discussion?
Yeah, this is Chris. I have a question of Eric.
And who do you have a question for?
Eric, you there?
Okay, Eric? Oh, he's coming back.
Perfect.
I'm here.
Hey, Eric, I just want to clarify. Gene asked a very pointed question, and you glossed over it because you're talking about some more high-level, serious issues. So when I first got elected in 2012, I think the 2020 budget, or the 2017 budget, was forecast to have a multi-million-dollar deficit, just like our 5-year plan shows a multi-million-dollar deficit moving forward. Can you explain why the city always carries that deficit moving forward, and why we don't show this massive windfall in potential revenues?
Well, again, it goes back to our forecasting being realistic and conservative. And we kind of expect the worst, but plan for the best. And so, as we've anticipated for upwards of, this is my 7th year here, for the last 5 LTFPs, the last 5 years, we knew we were going to see a deficit this fiscal year, the one that we're talking about now. And so, again, as we look outward, as Councilmember James had indicated, we will continue to do things that prepare us for that so that we can A, present a balanced budget, because that's always going to be our goal, and B, to maintain service levels that are critical to the residents and the businesses of San Clemente, and C, provide the necessary tools to the staff to be able to perform those service levels. And I think one thing that you can tell from our finance team is we've been consistent in delivering that, regardless of what we forecasted in future years as it relates to deficit. And again, I'll speak to some major economic development opportunities that are coming to the city of San Clemente, which I think it's important to note that these opportunities are amazing opportunities that most cities aren't having the luxury to deal with right now. And so again, just like our revenues are structured in a way that can help us weather this storm, these opportunities will only enhance our financial position, both from an ongoing and a one-time standpoint with those transactions when they come to the council. Did I answer your question, Councilmember Ham?
Nailed it. Thanks, Eric.
Okay, are we ready to have some council discussion on this? Unless there's any more questions, we can go ahead and open a discussion on this and any ideas or revisions that some council members want to suggest. So who would like to go first?
This is Chris. I'm ready to move on to number 2, oral communications.
I'm not yet, but I'd like to give the courtesy to my fellow members to start a discussion if they'd like. Councilmember Ward or Councilmember James?
At this point, I've stated my concerns. My concern is, have we cut deep enough to prepare for what's coming at us? You know, and like Mr. Sun has said, and I believe Dr. Dunick said as well, we literally don't know what's coming at us. And I would really like to see, from my perspective, again, I don't want to be Johnny One Note here, but I would like to see what a budget looks like with a 5% cut, a 10% cut, and a 15% cut in non-public. And when I say that, in non-public safety spending, like I said, over the next few days, I need to go and ask a lot of questions of staff to get comfortable with this budget. I'm not comfortable at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember James. I'd like to read some key takeaways from the League of California Cities analysis of the COVID-19 pandemic and the effect on California cities throughout the state. Some key points that they derived were cities are bracing for nearly $7 billion in general revenue shortfall for the next 2 fiscal years. All cities, regardless of size and geography, are impacted. Over 90% of cities report they are considering cutting, furloughing city staff, or reducing public services. And 72% of cities report they may take both actions. And cities project deep impacts to core services due to revenue shortfalls and deferred revenues regardless of size and geography. So that said, it's pretty scary hearing that. They did a lot of analysis on that, and reading our proposed budget, and I do appreciate all the work that went into it by staff, but it just concerns me that reading this, you would think that San Clemente is insulated from all of these negative impacts of COVID-19. And I do agree with Councilmember James that just to have a plan in place to be prepared, so a contingency plan at the 5, 10, 15% cuts, and that could be any kind of cuts. And I know we talked on May 5th in our motion, and it was unanimously passed to have discretionary funds, a list of those that we could cut. And so to have that in place, by the time we do have a budget to adopt, the council could approve these 3 different plans that can be triggered based on whatever outcome occurs in the next fiscal year due to the uncertainty that we hear a lot that we're facing with the financial impacts of the pandemic. So that would be great to be able to have that in place, and then staff can just literally implement that should the time come without coming back to council. I wrote myself a few notes of some things that I'd like to see. Okay, so that is what I would like to see, of course. And then in terms of some of the legal fees, I'd like to see us cap our legal fees. Even if $1 million, we don't have any large pending lawsuits right now, so I'd like to see that reduction. The reduction was very small in the budget. And then same with the Silver and Wright legal fees, if we could cap those at $100,000 for code enforcement. Regarding the pilot program for the park rangers that we voted on last year, that comes to a 1-year expiration in terms of the pilot. We should be having that come back to council. I know those are under the code enforcement, but come back to council so we can actually analyze that program and see its successes or failures and what we could do better, or whether we need that anymore. So that would be important. And then in terms of the MOU that's still out there for our employees, because I know there isn't the 3-year MOU with the raises calculated in the budget, but I think that's an important component for that to be negotiated, and then for us to not lose sight that that still needs to be addressed in some way, shape, or form, and let the union decide, you know, and be part of that process, because we do need to have a plan to either reduce, you know, make some reductions. We just don't have any of that, but have them be involved in that. That's important because our employees are important. And then, let's see, what else on my notes here? Yeah, I just really want to eliminate some of these lobbyists and consultants, communication consultants and strategists. I know that I made a motion several meetings ago, and Councilmember James seconded my motion to bring back an agenda report so we can really drill down into what these consultants and lobbyists do, and to consider eliminating some of those costs. So I didn't see that in this budget, but we do need to bring that back to council because that is on the radar and should be back before the next budget is adopted. So those are my comments for now. Thank you. Anybody else want to make some comments, or?
This is Councilmember Ward.
Yes, please, Councilmember Ward.
I just want to thank staff for an excellent presentation and for the work that they've done on this. I know from being a new council member that this is a daunting task to look at the budget when you're first on council and looking at all these funds. But I want to assure you that even though with this pandemic that we have an excellent staff And what they've done here, they go through every line item in every department of their expenditures, and they do it for every budget. But I have a feeling that they've really honed down what was necessary to present and do our city core services. And that's what our budget does. We're maintaining funding for our city core services. There isn't a glut here in what we're doing. It's what we need to provide services to our residents and our businesses. Things that have to do with code enforcement or Matt Silver, those type of things, those are things that we've talked about before, and they go to quality of life issues, and that's very important things that our residents have wanted us to work on. That's why we have the code enforcement and the park rangers that we do. They also serve to bolster and help our public safety and help our sheriff's department in enforcing our municipal code and with our court system. So that's very important. But staff here, I am really proud to say that our city, we are going to be able to weather this storm successfully, and that our reserves are still being funded and we aren't dipping into those. I do appreciate that staff's going to come back monthly and is going to monitor our revenues and see if our projections are correct. And I think there is a plan in place to where if we have to adjust, staff's gone through every single line item, and we've kind of dispersed all of our cuts throughout our budget so that we're not taking major hits to things. But I am proud of the long-term financial plan. I think Mr. Sun said it well, that it has put us in a positive situation because we looked at trends 5 years back and we look ahead 5 years, and we are able to weather the storm. And I'm happy to say that we aren't in the position that other cities are in, and we are lucky that way. And we never spend the revenue. We always project it very low. And when we get more revenue in, we save it. And so I'm really proud of that. And I want to thank the staff for the extra job that they did with this budget. I feel more confident than ever in our budget. And I just want to thank you. It was really comprehensive, and I appreciate staff drilling down on what we need. And I think the decision packages were good. They're things that we need to continue serving our people better with online permit applications and plan check reviews. So I just want to say thank you very much, and I'm really proud of this budget.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'm not sure if we need a motion.
To provide staff with direction concerning desired modifications to the City of San Clemente's proposed budget for fiscal year 2020-21. We do have a staff recommendation. They're looking for input from us and any changes. So I'd like to make a motion if someone does not have one. Or if you don't want to adopt this, we have a staff recommendation if anyone would like to make that a motion.
Well, I think we're going to approve the budget next meeting. This was just a budget hearing so that everybody can get familiar with it, so it gets out to the community. So I don't know that we need to make a motion this evening other than to go on to item number 2.
I happen to have a motion I would like to make, so I'm going to make it and see if anyone would like to second my motion. So my motion would be to bring back contingency plans at 5%, 10%, and 15% in expenditure reductions. So we are prepared going forward.
Second that motion.
Thank you, Councilmember James. Do we have any discussion on that motion before I take a vote? Hearing none.
I would like to just...
Oh, yes, please, Councilmember Ham.
Yeah, I'll make a couple comments. One, I appreciate your concern moving forward. I think the city staff has done a fantastic job with this budget in forecasting any potential pitfalls and putting us in a very safe fiscal position. That being said, I'm not going to task staff at this point during a pandemic, considering all the extensive work they've done, not only in the budget, but all the other pandemic issues we've seen in the last 2 months, to go back and rework 5, 10, and 15%. So I'll be a no vote on that issue.
Thank you, Councilmember Ham, for your comments. Okay, and Councilmember Ward?
I'm going to vote no on that.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councilmember James?
Aye.
And Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson is an aye, so that motion fails on a tie vote. So that said, we don't have another motion to substitute that one, so we'll just move forward with this staff recommendation. Direction concerning desired modifications to the City of San Clemente's proposed budget for fiscal year 2021. Does anyone want to make that motion? Because we do need to make a motion to conclude that and move on to oral communications so that staff has direction on what to do next.
I don't think we're going to propose any modifications, so I don't think we need to make that motion.
City Attorney, would you like to jump in and verify that?
Yeah, that's a staff recommendation, but if the council chooses not to act on this, I think the staff will be bringing it forward as is, and then you'll have a second chance at it when it comes
for the adoption of the budget meeting. Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so going forward, we have oral communications. City Clerk, do we have any comments tonight for oral communications?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
This oral communications for items not on the agenda. So I'll let the Deputy City Clerk read anything that we received.
Okay,
Laura?
that's great. Thank you.
Yes.
Laura, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we have one public comment. Dear Council, I want to express the concern of many San Clemente residents with respect to the way that Mr. Ham interacts with Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson. Mr. Ham is downright disrespectful, and his demeaning behavior does not represent the culture and spirit of San Clemente. Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson was elected by many of us to provide a fresh perspective and to push for transparent government. It seems to many of us that Councilmember Ham goes out of his way to oppose just about everything that Mayor Pro Tem puts forward. Everyone I know is behind Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson with respect to working to rework the way we run the city and to right the ship. The city has been through a lot with the death of Mayor Schwartz and the resignation of Mayor Bain. It's obvious to see why Mr. Ham was unable to get the votes to secure his position as mayor. And though he didn't get it, he made no effort to select Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson to the mayoral role. He seems to have felt that no mayor was better than Ms. Ferguson, the likely candidate. We need servant leaders, not egos. We are all tired of the drama. Let's get back to business to make San Clemente a better place to live, work, and play. I ask that you all treat each other with the utmost level of respect that the citizens expect of you. When the sheriff calls you out for the petty drama and threatens to pull his deputies from San Clemente, that should be a wake-up call that you've got a problem that needs to be addressed immediately. Please govern yourselves accordingly. Sincerely, Ryan Bork. And that's all I have for public comments.
Thank you very much, Laura. I appreciate you reading the comment. And do we have a motion for adjournment? That's our next item on the budget workshop agenda.
Gene, you're on mute.
Thank you, Chris. That's the nicest thing you've said to me lately. I'm joking. I make a motion to adjourn to the next regular council meeting is scheduled to take place on June 2nd, 2020. Closed session items will be considered at 5 p.m. and the regular business meeting will commence at 6 p.m. via teleconference.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilmember James. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ward. All right. Thank you all for joining us tonight. See you on June 2nd.
Hey, everybody. Thanks.
Council, are we going to vote on that?
Oh, yes, please. Thank you, Councilmember Ham. Councilmember Ham?
Aye.
Councilmember James?
Aye.
Councilmember Ward?
I'm an aye, and can I just say thank you to all of our staff that is on this, and Lieutenant Manhart was on here, and we didn't ask him any questions. So thank you for staying for the whole broadcast, and I'm an aye.
Wonderful. And I'm an I too. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thanks for joining us.